Week 3 of Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial wrapped new star witness and some potentially devastating bombshells. Trump's former White House communications director, Hope Hicks, spent several hours on the stand, at one point breaking into tears. She went into gritty detail about how Trump and his lackeys managed these scandals that plagued the Trump campaign in the lead-up to the 2016 election, including the efforts to fight reports of Trump's alleged affair with Karen McDougal. Joining us now, Katie Phang, attorney and the host of The Katie Phang Show right here on MSNBC, and Suzanne Craig, investigative reporter for The New York Times. I saw you guys fact-checking me in real time.
Yeah, right.
With me rolling my eyes.
You can tell Phang was still working. She was just doing it. So Katie, this was a big week in this trial. You had Hope Hicks, you had a lot of
Kate Davidson.
Mm-hmm. How did you see this week ending up from the way it began? Because I think a lot of people didn't know exactly the impact that Hope Hicks would have because she was so close to Trump and thought that there would be sort of this protective veneer and she would be reticent. But she threw down some information that I thought really helped the prosecution's case. How did you see this week?
I agree. I will say this week was a mixed bag. All good for the prosecution. And when I say mixed bag is there's a lot of us that are looking for the marquee name witnesses, the Hope Hicks, the Michael Cohens, the Stormy Daniels. But we also have to give credit, and I wrote a piece on MSNBC Online about this, the custodian of records. Right. These people, if you don't have them, you don't get the texts in that were read to the jury. You don't get the videos in or the recordings in that the jurors are very visceral creatures. They want to see something, touch something, listen to something. That's how you keep them engaged, and that's why you kind of make sure that you have that evidence in. But to end with Hope Hicks, I thought was perfect timing, and it's just luck, as Charles and I know when we try cases. And Suzanne now, I say she has an honorary JD.
Yeah, right. She does.
Right, at this point. But it was great for the prosecution to end with Hope Hicks because of exactly what you said. I give her no quarter. She knew exactly who he was. If she didn't know and then she saw who Donald Trump was, she should have gotten the hell out, but she didn't. She came back for more, let's be clear.
Yep.
And the tears, crocodile tears. But, having that level, I think, of emotion going into her testimony made her more credible. I put on Twitter today that she still put lipstick on a pig. It's not like she was all in with the testimony, but she made it clear that Donald Trump ran it all.
So that's the important piece.
Right? The idea that he was not controlling what was going on is... I'm not allowed to say this. So anyway,
No, well, I think the thing that everyone should take away from this week is that it's probably the most reminiscent in terms of cadence of what a trial actually feels like. There are some really exciting moments. There's some really scintillating things that come out from an evidence standpoint. But then there are also some very mundane, pedestrian moments as well. And that's just the cadence of a trial. And we finally have settled into that in the normalcy, if you will, of a trial that we haven't seen. I've been here a minute and a half. I'm already going to take the glasses off and talk to a lawyer. Katie, I have a question for you. I want to talk really quickly about Keith Davidson.
Sure.
And let's get into this. So this entire trial is shrouded in people who have lots of different credibility issues. It's sullied from the very nature of it. You're talking about a former president and a playmate and hush money and just all sorts of things. Now, Keith Davidson is not someone who's a very clean-cut character. You're talking about somebody who previously had gotten into some trouble for allegedly trying to extort Hulk Hogan, and he probably provided the most contentious testimony on the stand, at least in terms of the back and forth this week. Do you think that his background, just in terms of him being a little bit of a shady character, hurts the prosecution? Or is it just kind of like, well, everybody here, Michael Cohen on down, the entire thing is sullied to start, and so it doesn't matter?
One of my favorite sayings is pigs don't marry giraffes. Pigs don't marry giraffes.
It's a concept.
Right? So, and the reason why is everybody has unclean hands. There is no one that has clean hands in this scenario. No one. From the top down. So when you, as we know, when you prosecute mobsters, you got people that go and they knock the knees. You got people that put the heads of the horses in places. You got people that are directing those people to do it. They all have unclean hands. something that was really fleeting in opening that we may not have picked up on from Todd Blanche. He talked about, in jury selection, he talked about accessory liability. It was very fleeting. And it's this legal concept of principles that everybody, when we go to rob the bank, from the driver of the getaway car to the people that go in with the guns, we are all equally liable. Same thing here. Donald Trump may not have actually gone, although he did actually sign the check, but he may not have actually been like, Stormy, I'm going to pay you off. But the fact that he was involved and Keith Davidson was involved also leans into the concept there's a small nucleus of people that did this.
Right.
This wasn't some huge, wide-ranging conspiracy, and they kept it tight.
Kitty, I also don't think I was really interested in the cross-examination of Keith Davidson. Tell me if I'm off here, but I sort of thought they should have just established that he didn't know Donald Trump, because I thought all the rest of it, I get they were trying to sully him up, but it really had nothing to do with what his interactions were with the two women and the contracts. So I was surprised a little bit that they went as far as they did. He's a scoundrel, so we know that. But I think we knew that without all of the sideshow that we got on the cross. I felt they went too far.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I'm
as
sort
a
of
defense attorney, you got to go for the goal. You got to throw whatever you can on the wall and hope something.
Go with what you've got.
Well, all of our attorney friends keep reminding us that some of the pieces of this that might seem less scintillating or less interesting in the room are about closings and about having all of your ducks in a row when you get to closings. At the same time, you know that the jury is sitting there, and a lot of it is the way that they feel about what it is that they are watching. So for you as a reporter sitting in that room, given that you are our eyes and ears, at the end of this long week, sort of what stood out most to you?
Well, and there's been a lot of discussion sort of about the big names that were on. I found David Pecker very powerful. We've talked about Keith Davidson and Hope Hicks and that. But I just have to say, as a reporter, there were just some reporter moments that stood out. Because this is a trial that involves a lot of dealings with the media, whether it's the National Enquirer or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. And there was just some moments. There was one in particular, because I dealt with Trump and Hope Hicks during the campaign, and I've dealt with them, in the last 8 years, as a reporter at the Times covering him, was that moment when David Fahrenthold from the Washington Post sent over an email. It was at 1:29 in the afternoon, and that moment, and it's weeks before the election, and he has the Access Hollywood tape. And he's asking for comment, and he says there's some vulgar language in here, and he puts the transcript below. And Hope Hicks's instinct, instead of saying, let me just even ask the principal to get a denial, she was just deny, deny, deny. Their first instinct is lie, lie, lie. And that is the campaign that I know. And so not only was Donald Trump sort of involved in every aspect, according to Hope Hicks apparently was taking notes, and she was learning from him. They just lie. That is their first instinct. And to see it in an email like that without even running it down, my stock and trade is making sure I get everything right. And I get upset if there's a spelling mistake in something. Like, it's just maddening to see stuff like that. You know it, but to see it. And then just the other moment that was just made me laugh was when Hope Hicks on Friday talked about this moment where she'd overheard a conference call between David Pecker and Donald Trump. She was walking in and out of meetings. And the phone, she could hear both ends of the conversation. And Trump was talking to Pecker about the Ben Carson story that we now know Donald Trump had sort of come up with and sent over to the National Enquirer, and they'd embellished it. And it was about Ben Carson having left a sponge in a patient's brain, and it was wrong. And they were laughing about it and talking about it. And Donald Trump says, you should get a Pulitzer for that. It's just like, and that was a funny moment. It was also just a horrifying moment, and it's important to the case, which is why we heard it, because it establishes that relationship between David Pecker and Donald Trump. Should you have doubted it coming out of David Pecker's mouth, you're now hearing it in another scene from another witness.
Suzanne, what did you make of Hicks talking about Michael Cohen inserting himself into pretty much everything and wanting to be more relevant in Trump world than maybe he was? She noted he would try to insert himself at certain moments, but he wasn't supposed to be on the campaign in any official capacity. Hicks said there were things he did in a voluntary capacity because of his interests. How did you read that? There was a sense of trying to diminish the impact of what Michael Cohen may say in his testimony, but also this recognition that, because he wasn't so integrated the way he may have projected, there's something to the fact that he was asked to do certain things for Donald Trump, like stroke these checks.
I think what Donald Trump's lawyers are going to try and tell us at the end of this in summation is that Michael Cohen was a rogue actor and that he went out on his own and made this payment to Stormy Daniels, the one that's mainly in question. So I think it established
that he
was
just took
$130,000
out of his bank account because he wanted to be relevant.
The home equity line.
Which is why it is interesting then that
Right.
you have Hope Hicks saying, this is not a person I know to be particularly generous. This is not a person
She said he wasn't
I know.
charitable, I think is what she said.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that is exactly sort of the contrast that we're seeing with some of the evidence. And it leads me to another piece of evidence that I wanted to get your impressions on, and Katie, just how damaging you think this is. It came out this week that there's this January 10th, 2018 note from the Wall Street Journal, from an article basically that Michael Cohen has provided around Stormy Daniels saying we had no sexual relationship. And so the semantics of it ultimately seem to be contradictory, but they were really on center stage this week. Your thoughts on how that ultimately may play out in the minds of the jurors, or just did it even strike you as having an impact?
This is a piece of the deny, and the other thing is semantics. That was a non-denial denial. And so let's break that down. It was a romantic sexual relationship. And the witness that spoke to that was Keith Davidson, and he put out a statement saying there was no romantic sexual relationship. And he was asked about that. How truthful was that? He says it was, because there was no sexual romantic, there was no sexual relationship, and it wasn't romantic, so it was accurate. They just had sex. And so once he broke it down and he put the component, he laid out the component pieces, it was crazy. They were putting out all these non-denial denials. The Wall Street Journal reporters were aware that was a non-denial denial. But it just reminded me, and I've dealt with his finances, whenever we would have his taxes, they would first of all just say we didn't have them, which we did. Like they would say, you're wrong. And then they would send over statements. Donald Trump pays a lot of taxes. Well, he's talking about property tax. But that's the sort of stuff you deal with these guys. And their goal at the end of it, and, we're getting a statement from the White House that's saying what we have is wrong. And then we're getting all this, non-denial denial stuff. It usually sends us back to do more work. So it can be successful, but it's just ridiculous. And I'm glad it's being laid bare in court. And some of it goes, is going to go directly to the end, to the, when we hear the closing statement. Some of this stuff is going to play in. And the juries, their heads are probably spinning, thinking, wow, this is how it was running.